Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2020 Chevrolet Equinox, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the Roadmaster Smart Diode Wiring Kit for vehicles with incandescent taillights. So there's going to be a total of 5 main components needed to flat tow your Equinox down the road. First one's going to be the base plate. Now, that base plate is going to provide us with a solid and reliable connection point. That way we can hook our tow bar up to it. Tow bar is going to be that second component. And this could actually be the physical link that connects the front of your Equinox to the back of your motorhome. Third main component is going to be your safety cables. And these are going to be there in the event of an unlikely disconnect. These are going to keep your Equinox attached to your motorhome. The fourth main component is going to be your diode wiring. So it's going to transfer the lighting functions from the back of your motorhome to the back of your Equinox, keeping you safe and legal. And last but not least, we're going to have our braking system. The braking system is going to apply the brakes in your Equinox whenever you hit the brakes in your motorhome. That way it'll bring you to a more safe and predictable stop. So here you can kind of see the smart diodes in action. We have our left turn signal on the motorhome going, and those diodes are transferring that power back here to the Equinox's left turn signal. So it really works out well. Not only is it going to provide us with our left and right turn, but it's also going to provide us with that tail light function as well as our brake lights. So in my opinion, diode wiring is definitely the way to go, especially for those of you that flat tow often. And that's because you're not even going to notice it once it's installed. It's going to stay with your Equinox, and it literally takes hardly any time at all to set up when you are ready to flat tow. You simply just have to plug in to the front of your Equinox to the back of your motorhome, and that's really all there is to it. So it really does save a ton of time. Now, for those of you that flat tow maybe once or twice a year, the other style of wiring, magnetic lighting, may be a better option. That's because it is temporary, but the downside is it requires more setup. So that's why I suggest the diodes for those of you that do it all the time, and magnetic lighting if, again, you go once or twice a year. But that magnetic lighting, if you choose to go with that and you flat tow a lot, it really becomes kind of a hassle, at least in my opinion. It's going to require you to set it up every time, stick those lights onto the top of your car, and drape wires all the way up to the front. And here at the front of our Equinox, here's that plug that whenever we are ready to hook up, this is what we're going to plug our cord into. Got a nice spring-loaded door to keep dirt and debris out when we're not using it. But whenever we are ready, we're going to take our cable, plug it in there, and plug the other side to the back of our motorhome. And that's really all there is to it. So one of the really good things about this kit is the fact that it does indeed use diodes, and those diodes are going to protect your Equinox's factory wiring if a short or anything like that were to occur on the motorhome side. And with today's newer vehicles, that's really important. Their electrical systems are really complicated, so you don't want to do anything to jeopardize that. And with the smart diodes, speaking about the electrical systems, what's nice about the smart ones is that they're only going to need one wire to tie into, as opposed to some of the other styles which require you to splice into a few wires. So with the smart diodes, a little less invasive, and they're a little bit smaller too, so they're a little bit easier to mount up behind your taillight. Now in our case, our kit did come included with this coiled cable, which will stay nice and tight, high off the ground whenever you're going straight down the road. But whenever you need that extra length because of a wide turn or something like that, it'll stretch out and give it to us. Now, there is a setup for just about any type of kit that you need. So what I mean by that is some tow bars actually come included with this cable here, so you can pick up a kit that doesn't have that. Or if your tow bar has channels in the side, you can always use a straight cable. That way you can run it through them channels and keep everything up nice and high. So at the end of the day, kit you really can't go wrong with. Not only is it going to keep your Equinox protected, but it's going to be really hassle-free as far as hooking it up is concerned. Now, as far as the installation goes, it's really not too bad. I would say the most time-consuming part is probably running your wiring from the front here all the way to the back. But other than that, everything's pretty straightforward and shouldn't take you a whole lot of time. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and do that together now. To begin our install, we're going to be here at the front of our Equinox, and our fascia is removed because we're doing this at the same time as we did our base plate. Makes life a lot easier. But the first thing you're going to want to do is take one end of your bundle of wire, run it through your bracket. Our base plate came included with one. And we're going to take the little rubber boot on the back of the plug, slide that over our wiring. Then we're just going to separate these wires. So you just take some snips and kind of carefully cut in between them. Then we're just going to pull them apart. So we're just going to go maybe a few inches here. So once we have them separated, we can strip them back, and that'll expose the insulation underneath. And I like to give them a good twist just to keep them nice and tight. And then we're going to connect them to the back of our plug. So this is pretty straightforward here. We're going to see a handful of set screws, and what you want to do is back off those set screws just enough to get our wires inside. You don't want to pull these completely out because they can be tricky to find if you drop them. But if you look very closely on the back of the plug, each terminal is going to be labeled. So if you start up top here, TM, that's for tail lights. Our brown wire will go to it. Right here is GD for ground. Our white wire will go there. LT, left turn. Our yellow wire will go there, and RT for right turn, and our green wire will go to it. So if we take our corresponding wire, we'll just start with TM, the brown wire. You push it down into place, and then tighten up that set screw. And I'll repeat that process for the rest of our wires here. So this is what our plug looks like with all of the wires installed. Once we have it like that, we can take our rubber cap, slide it over, and secure it to the bracket. Depending on your bracket, you may have to slide the plug in first and then put the rubber plug on. But from there, I'll just go ahead and secure this to the bracket. Once I have that done, we can start running our wiring. So I went ahead and started routing our wiring, and I just followed it along the top of the base plate here. Kind of came up behind her bumper beam. See, the wiring comes out right there. Then along this edge, kind of just shot it underneath of our washer reservoir. You can see where it comes up. Brought it up through here. And what we're going to do now is work on our ground wire. Now I suggest if you're using a braking system that ties into this diode wiring, leave yourself a little bit of slack here in the engine compartment. Make life easier in the long run when you go to hook up your braking system. But with that being said, we're going to hook up right now just our white wire. So I'm going to very carefully cut it. And kind of separate it from the rest of our bundle. And the wire that we're going to be working with, the white wire, you want to make sure this is the end that connects to our plug in the front of our car. So we're going to take that in, strip back that insulation. Going to take a ring terminal, slide that over the bare end of the wire, and then crimp it down. Now if you look right here on our shock tower, we're going to have a factory ground. So what we're going to do is pull that nut off. That's a 10 millimeter. Then we will take our ring terminal that we connected to the white wire, slide that over the stud, and re-secure that nut. Now with that connected, that leaves us with the other end of our white wire that's still attached to our big bundle, our big harness. And what I'm going to do is just pull on this wire until we completely separate it from our harness. Because chances are good we're probably going to need this extra wiring here later on. So we'll just separate the white one and set it off to the side just in case we need it later. So I continued to route our bundle of wiring towards the back of our Equinox, and I simply just ran it along through here. It's a little tricky to see, but you can get to it relatively easy. But I just dropped that wiring straight down along our firewall to the bottom side of our car. So now underneath of our Equinox, I continue to route our wiring towards the back. So right up through there is where it dropped down along our firewall. I kept our wire nice and tight, securing it with some zip ties along the way. Now when you route this, you want to be sure to avoid any hot or moving parts. What I've done is just followed some of these factory lines. Again, you want to keep it nice and secure along the way. Right here, it kind of gets a little tricky to see, but the wire kind of runs in between the frame, rail, and our fuel tank. It continues up. So you can see where it comes out right here. Going up and over our rear subframe. And at this point here, I separated our green wire from our yellow and brown. The green wire will run over to the passenger side, and I'll show you that in a moment. But let's continue on with our yellow and brown wire. So I just continued on top of our subframe. So that wire is just right up here. Drops down right there. And at this point, I just took our wire and kind of bundled it up for now. Now back to our green wire, where we left off. This just follows this factory wire loom over to the passenger side. Very similar to the driver's side, I just went up and over our subframe. Down along through here. And once I got to about this point, again, I just kind of let our wire hang out for now. So now what we can do is come to the back of our Equinox, open up the hatch, and we need to remove our tail lights. So we're going to have two little plastic covers. Kind of just take a little screwdriver or pick, open them up. That'll expose the fastener underneath. And we're going to remove those two fasteners using a T15 Torx bit. We get both of them out. Then we can grab our tail light, kind of wiggle it and pull back towards you, and that will pull it out. From there, we can disconnect our electrical connectors. That's simply pushing down on that tab and pulling outward. I'll set this to the side and repeat the same process over on the passenger side. Now we can go ahead and pull our wires up into our taillight pocket. So I'm just using a fish wire. It's a piece of nylon tubing. You could always use a thick piece of string or a coat hanger or something like that. You just drop it down, and here at the bottom I taped on our yellow and brown wire, and then I actually taped on that extra white wire that we had left over. So what I'm going to do is just pull that up, and just continue to pull until we have all the slack out of it. So now I went ahead and tested our Equinoxes wiring, and what we're looking for is the brake light signal. So whenever we apply the brakes, we want the wire that has power going to it. Which on the driver's side, it is this light gray wire with a yellow stripe. So what we're going to do is cut that wire in half. And strip back both ends of that insulation. This wire's pretty thin, so be careful while you're doing this. And once you have them stripped back, we're going to take some of our terminals here and crimp them on. So I'll give that wire a twist, slide that terminal over the bare end, and crimp it down. Do the same thing for this other end here. Now that we have these crimped, we can take one of our diodes and put it in place. So on the side with two terminals, you'll see it says car brake out. That's going to go closest to our factory plug here. So I'll just slide over. And on this one, it'll say car brake in. So that wire will get plugged into it. So what I did now is just trimmed our wires to length and strip back the ends of the insulation on all three. This yellow wire, we're just going to take our terminals, slide that over and crimp it down. We'll go ahead and plug that into our diode, and this will go to the RV brake side here. I'll plug in. Now the brown wire and the white wire, we're going to do a little something different. We're actually going to connect these two ends together. So we'll twist those. We're going to take a butt connector. Now I'm using a heat shrink butt connector. It gives us a little more protection against corrosion and stuff like that. However, the one that comes included with the kit will work just fine. If you'd rather use these, you can get them here at eTrailer. You just slide that over, crimp it down. And on the other side of the butt connector, what I've done is just cut a few inch piece of wire and strip back both ends. One end we're going to put in the butt connector, crimp it down. The other end we're going to take one of our terminals, slide that over, and crimp it down. This end will plug into our diode where it says RV tail. So now that I got that plugged in, I'll come back with the heat source and seal up the ends on our butt connector. So here's what our heat shrink butt connector looks like once the ends are all sealed up. Now from there, the kit does come with a small piece of white wire, and you're going to strip back the insulation on both ends. One end you're going to crimp on the included ring terminal. The other end you're going to crimp on one of these Spade terminals. This is going to need to get grounded, so I'm just going to do it down here out of the way. You're going to make sure you're on a solid piece of steel though, and I'm going to take the included self-tapping screw and run that in. So now that that's secured, I'm going to tuck our wire down there, and the end of it is going to get plugged into this terminal here that says ground. So I went ahead and just secured our diode using a zip tie. And then we can reinstall our tail light. So we'll just plug our connectors back in. push everything down to where it won't get pinched. And simply just reinstall the light the opposite way that we removed it. So now underneath our Equinox, I went ahead and routed our white wire over to the passenger side. So here's where it goes. It shoots down, kind of comes up and over a little bit. You can see it right there. And I just follow that all the way over where it drops down here and meets up with our green wire. Then what I've done, just like the other side, is used a fish wire and taped on our white and green wire to it. So I went ahead and pulled my wires up into the taillight pocket over here on the passenger side and hooked them up pretty much the exact same way as the driver's side. The factory brake signal is going to be this white wire with a yellow stripe. So that goes to car brake in. Car brake out. There's that factory white wire with the yellow stripe for a plug. We have the white wire that we ran over, goes to RV tail. The green wire goes to RV brake. And then we did the same thing with the ground. Just use this short piece of wire, connect it to the ground terminal, and secured it to the body of our vehicle there. Now we can go ahead and plug our taillight back in and reinstall it the opposite way that we removed it. So now it's a good idea to test your wiring. So you want to hook everything up, and we'll try our taillights, our left turn signal, our right turn signal, and our brake lights. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Roadmaster Smart Diode Wiring Kit on our 2020 Chevy Equinox.